Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us back here at Temas Resources channel. We're sitting here once again with Mike. We want to have a meta conversation about what it is that Temas Resources is doing and how you could really define the company. But first off, Mike, how are you doing today?
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Michael. Just getting ready for fall. I had to pull out the old sweater.
Good, good, good. I'm more of a tracksuit guy myself, but I can appreciate a good sweater. So let's kind of dive in. How would you really define Temas as a company?
Well, I guess to the mining guys, we're a green mineral processing technology company. And for your average retail investor who's agnostic or is not into mining, we're a technology royalty company, developing projects that would feed into the mining space. So we don't necessarily want to own the project itself, but we have the technology that can make your processing greener, cleaner, more economic.
Okay, because can you walk us through a timeline on how that would look? So you people
Yeah.
come to you then, or how does that work?
Well, in a sense, yeah, we have some, and hopefully we'll be able to announce a couple contracts near term. But we have done a lot of test work with the technologies prior to us owning them. Which we purchased them earlier this year. There was like about $8-9 million spent just on titanium dioxide testing,
Mhm.
and that's the one we plan to commercialize because we have a project with the ilmenite that we can produce titanium dioxide from. And sort of this thing is it's hard for people to accept a new technology until somebody else is using it. Like not everyone's going to buy electric cars until the first person's got an electric car and it works and it doesn't blow up on the road. So it's the same here. Nobody's going to put $200 million into the first one, but once the first one's off the road, then there's the second and the third. And once we can show the robustness and the lower carbon footprint, better recoveries, we recover all the metals, not just some of the metals, that you will see, I think, a much broader acceptance, especially in a market and global economy where reducing carbon footprint and environmental greening and sustainability are more important than they were 20 years ago.
Okay, so from there, so you guys do this processing. Give me what happens next. So you guys process the metals for these guys. Where does
We
it go
we
from?
actually don't even have to process them. What we're giving them is the recipe on how to process it.
Okay.
So we don't even process it for them. It becomes we'll give them, here's the secret sauce. Here's the steps to put it into the oven and make sure it bakes up properly, because you don't want your souffle to collapse.
Fair.
And then once it's baked, how big you want to make it will help you scale it up. You want to make it smaller, we'll help you make it smaller. Do you have some oddball products that are economic? We'll make sure you recover them. If you've got some stuff that there's just not enough of it to recover and it becomes a headache, we'll make sure that it becomes an environmentally friendly waste product.
Okay, yeah. And as you mentioned before, while there is some technological inertia at play here, this is something where it's going to become a game of momentum. You got to build it up, and then it's just kind of waterfall from there, assuming the technology is
Exactly.
really advanced versus what's currently going on. So
That's right.
from there,
That's right.
I would ask you, as you said, one of the key words here is royalty. So how would this play out for Temis in the long term? Say, completely hypothetically, you have 4 or 5 companies signed up with you guys. How would that look for you?
So let's say we'll start with one company and it produces 1 million pounds of nickel a year.
Mhm.
We would tack on a royalty, likely 1 to 2% of their total production on the nickel and the platinum and palladium that they're getting. But we expect that we're going to increase their recoveries by 5, 10, 15% and lower their energy costs
Mhm.
and let them get a higher recovery of all the other metals that they aren't recovering. So for them to give up 2% to actually get a higher profit and more product, it's not really a net loss for them. It becomes actually still a net gain to them. So we're taking a bit of the upside
Yeah.
off the top. We're not asking for them to give us, more than they're already paying. You're going to get more, and we're going to take a piece of the more you're getting.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a mathematical game at that point for the companies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and commodity prices will, uh, I think, continue to go up, and there'll be more and more opportunities for us to go after these oddball projects that have a little more complicated metallurgy. And what we work with, it tends to deal with the complicated metallurgy a little better than the traditional processes.
Okay, so again, let's try to define a couple more terms. When you're saying complicated metallurgy, explain what the difference is of that versus traditional. Not to
Yeah,
grill
so
you.
sometimes you'll have a rock that, in the case of the titanium dioxide we have in Quebec, it's not here's your iron, here's your titanium. It's
Mhm.
here's your iron and here's your titanium. It's all kind of tied in there. So you can't do I'm going to crush it and physically separate it. We got to do a chemical separation.
Gotcha.
So there's one example, and we're working that, and that is really why we got into this space, is because we had this complicated, everything's intergrown and doesn't want to come apart. So by, if you've got a pink and a green rock and they split up really nicely, great. But if you got a pink rock and a green rock that kind of make a brown mess, you can't separate it unless you do it chemically. So that's sort of the complicated. You have some intergrown structures, you have some chemistries that are a little odd. In the case of the carbonate and ammonia leaching we have with metal leach out, we can work in carbonate rocks where acids just kind of go to carbon and you just have to keep adding it. You don't want to be able to do that with ammonia. It's much more specific to the metal in that environment. So we're kind of using science to our advantage and getting away from the traditional processing. The one thing I've found is engineers like to do things the same way again and again and again.
Yeah.
They're not always saying, hey, well, let's try something new. It's like, well, it's worked for 50 years. Let's keep doing that.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, the technological inertia at play. It takes a lot to disrupt an industry. Once things are set in their ways, it takes like a true disruptor to kind of come in. And from there, the last word I wanted to get another focus on you on was the word green. So give me that, like, how is it more green versus the standard?
So we're recycling in the processes we have, especially with the hydrochloric acid processes. We recycle all the reagents, so that it's closed loop on the chemicals we put into the system. They don't go back out. What we are trying to do on every process we have is reduce the carbon footprint. That means reduce the temperatures, reduce the energy consumption. In cases now, we're doing some test work with hydrogen to replace natural gas in a few processes. We're looking at microwaves to do a bit of roasting versus a traditional chemical roasting. So there's certain things that we're looking at scales that in a laboratory were common 20 years ago, but we're looking at doing that mainstream because we can get electricity as a green source from solar, wind, hydro, tidal. You've got lots of potential green sources for electricity. And in Scandinavia and North America, and it'll come to me down in South Tasmania and Australia, you've got a lot of hydropower. So why not use that hydropower as an advantage? We do it already with the aluminum industry. Sure. So why not look at it for other industries too?
All right, Mike, very well said. Any closing remarks? Anything else you want to add? I feel like you really walked through everything, and anyone can, of course, ask questions about it as well, and we'll happily dive into it. But yeah, Mike, any last closing remarks here?
I just think just the recent last 2 weeks, looking at the commodities, the stock market's up and down like a yo-yo, but commodity demand is coming back in, and I think you're going to see copper, nickel, PGEs, lithium, almost everything except for gold and silver seem to have a sudden surge in demand. And I don't know if it's coming on fast enough to meet the demand. So we might be going into an environment where metal prices will go up, and that'll give opportunities for us for some new mines to get our foot in the door.
Very well said. Yeah, with copper and a lot of all those other precious metals right now, the EV demand is kind of spiking, and it looks like that's not going to slow down. And it looks like there's going to be a supply crunch. You're seeing some mines coming online for like cobalt and stuff, but the demand is just continuously climbing. The supply's not keeping up, and you're going to see these prices continuously going up. At least that's my prediction. The only other thing that can happen is the price goes down. So
yeah, and we'll see what Uncle Joe does if he actually gets some infrastructure money. That's another hit to the supply chain where we need raw materials to fix bridges and put up new highways. It's not that'll be more limestone and gravel and asphalt, but that's another resource crunch, and that's another thing that's going to hit the market for the miners.
All right, Mike. Well, the future looks bright for mining, and thank you for coming on again, and thank you everyone for watching. Any other questions? Again, don't be afraid to ask. We'll happily dive into it for you. But for now, stay tuned. We'll get you some more news over the wire as soon as it comes in. Have a wonderful day, Mike.
Be safe. Cheers.